quiet on campus now. The camp has been taken down, and the faculty are worried that the speech of the students has been silenced. Was it speech? What speech was it? Where have all the students gone if they are no longer allowed to camp in the quad and have speech in the quad and perform in the quad? What? Now that it's quiet on campus, we need to think about what just happened. Yes, we're still going to talk about the encampments tonight on the Mosaic Ark. Welcome. You're there? Oh, you're there? Oh no! Oh no! I was having terrible dreams. I was having terrible dreams of people coming and waking me up in the middle of the night and telling me to get out of the camp. Oh wait, that wasn't me. I must be channeling. I'm so tired. So I was actually at medievalist camp this past weekend, but that involved sleeping in the dorms. So like the opposite. What the students
Oh, it did. Oh, that must have been interesting.
Well, okay, so this is like the International Medieval Congress at Kalamazoo, Michigan, and the thing about it for the last 59, well, so it's 59 years old, so it's literally exactly as old as I am. Wikipedia, take note. And I've been going since 91, and the sort of thing about going to the International Medieval Congress always was we slept in the dorm rooms, like these breeze block unair conditioned. They're sort of heated, but it's hard to tell. Dorm rooms that were built in 1965, so the dorm rooms are exactly as old as the conference. and the whole thing was, you go and you stay in the dorm room, and you it's like camp, right? This time it was so much like camp. All we had was a fitted sheet. It was a good thing I brought a blanket because there was no pillows, no towels.
I'm having flashbacks to college myself now. That would be a really strange feeling. Yeah. I would have strange dreams. Yeah.
And they're tearing the building down in a month or so because they're going to rebuild it because it was built in 1965 and they've upgraded all of their facilities, but not yet these older dorms, right? So I'm in my camp phase. And the thing is, it's Western Michigan University. It's a fairly nice campus to stroll around on, and they've got a pond with ducks. I'm gonna trigger Mel with her duck neighbor. They've got ducks and muskrats and fish and stuff like that. So it's very it's all quite idyllic. Yeah. So I've been dreaming about camping, but I think that's a different kind of camp. We do have to talk about the camp again, don't we? Yes.
Okay.
No, I mean, you said last week, I don't remember if it was on camera afterwards, but it's like, we went on for 2.5 hours already. This event takes some unpacking, and it feels like we have a responsibility to our project here on the Mosaic Ark. Hope I didn't just spill my water. I do have to have, water to get through this. We have a responsibility on the Mosaic Ark to, thoroughly unwind, unravel, unpick. What metaphor should I use now? Drain the swamp. No, wait.
Unpack. Get it? See what I did there?
Or pack the tents up, take the, no, to observing as we do from the vantage point of our ocean going vessel. This is the Gen X cruise, right? We do it in an ark with animals and shit, I guess. No,
the Gen X cruise. I can't even imagine.
I think this is us, right? It's like we're probably bailing as we go, right?
Yeah, we're bailing away. We inherited the cruise ship from the boomers. We're all bailing it out because it's sinking.
Desperately. Yes, this is the most apt metaphor we've had for our culture yet, right? Here the boomers need to not been cleaning out the stables for decades, and here we are sitting there looking at these poor animals up to their knees in shit. To elaborate that metaphor further.
Yeah. Torture that metaphor.
Well, it was funny being at the Congress. I hadn't been to the International Medieval Congress since 2019, and there had been a few years in there when they did it only on Zoom, and they did meet in person last year, but I didn't go. And then this year, more of us came back. I needed to go to the book fair, look at the books. That's major reason to go to the Congress. But they still had about a quarter, maybe, of the sessions on Zoom, right? So it was like there were people missing because they were only attending virtually. So,
do you think people just got used to it, and then prefer it, or is there a real nervousness about being in public amongst a certain group?
Well, okay, so this fits with our metaphor of, the encampment being physically present and being on the campus and such, and why would people be preferring to perform? I think, one, people are lazy, and people are lazy and it's expensive, right? So these two things could, and so if you can tell yourself, well, I bet what people do is they just do their own session and that's it, because sitting and being on Zoom for days. The conference is 3 days long, right? And
that's tedious.
That's tedious. And the camp part, right? It's like being there in person to talk to everybody, see the books, buy stuff, eat with each other. All of that. Conferences are actually incredibly important ways of creating community.
Well, the books especially, they're things you want to hold and touch and open up, and they're like treasures, right?
Oh, yeah.
Why would you just want to look at it on a screen? It's just a big bookstore with your favorite topics in it, isn't it?
Oh, and the booksellers love us because the medievalists buy books. They always are telling us, the different press representatives, and there's some that do aggregate sales from multiple presses, right? One of them gave me the extra bag of Jelly Bellies because he likes me. He did. It was very nice. There's a sub story in that, which we won't go into the footnote on, about what he showed me about where he gets the Jelly Bellies. Anyway, has to do with sugar. That they're always very happy because they say we medievalists buy lots of books. We're really book friendly community, but you can see the books advertised by the publishers in their mailing lists and stuff like that online all the time. But you're right, it's completely different getting to go there, look at the books. You maybe buy however many you can carry, and take pictures of the ones that you're going to remember to get, and you get to thumb through them and learn from them quickly, what else is going on. It's a really important way of knowing what's happening in the field, what the new titles are coming out, and then some of the presses, like bring their whole back catalog, like Cistercian publications, they bring everything, right? So you're reminded year by year, that you really should be reading more Bernard of Clairvaux, for example. So it's like it's the best kind of speech camp because it's got oral presentations, it's got people in physical space with each other.
That sounds great. I've gone to some conferences before, not related to work. There were religious type conferences, and it was just interesting meeting all the different types of people and listening to the different speakers and seeing different books for sale and things like that. I kind of like them when it's when it wasn't work related. I loved it, but yeah.
Well, this is work related, and I do love it. Yeah,
you're doing something you like.
Well, that's fair.
I did not for a long time. Well, I didn't say I didn't like it, but it's if you're all these books, why would you not want to go to that? That's amazing.
Well, you could say your world is books, and so you just need the books, and you don't need to talk to the human beings, right?
Well, where's the fun in that, though?
Well, indeed, right? And the thing, no, this is topical to our problem about the students in their camp, right? Yeah. Because it was like I hadn't been at this conference for 5 years. A lot of people hadn't been in that same amount of time because 2019 was the last time that was like full attendance. It's about 2,500 people that come to this conference. So it's tiny in comparison with some of the professional conferences like American Historical Association be 10,000 people or something, but it's big. It's big in comparison with other kinds of conferences that are more like a special subject or something, and those may be 50 or 100 people. So this is, there's a lot of people that you can, accidentally end up in conversation with, or, get to meet when you hadn't talked to them before because you can go to their session and hear their talk and introduce yourself and things like that. So it's the socialization. And Kalamazoo has also been really important for graduate students in the field because it's less because we stayed in the dorm rooms. It was less expensive than the conferences that they have at the conference hotels because you just had to pay for the sheet rental. I don't know.
It's so cheap. Oh,
I can't believe they didn't even give us towels this time. It was like a sheet, right?
Well, that's what happens when you only have 25% of the people like showing up, or was it 25% on Zoom?
25% on Zoom, right?
So I wonder if they got a discount. Like you said, they're cheap, right?
Well, they're tearing the building down to build a fancier one next year. Maybe, I don't know whether we'll be in a different building next year because they'll built the new one. And whether I'll request the old dorm rooms, for nostalgia's and asceticism's sake.
You would request. Okay.
It's not really Kalamazoo unless you can't possibly sleep because the bed's so uncomfortable and it's too hot and you forgot your
that
blanket.
Sounds like my dorm room. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. It was. They had breeze block walls that had been painted lime green,
yep.
and they had these plastic mattresses.
Yes.
Vinyl. It's just really uncomfortable, horrible things. But
see, this is why people go to college to sleep in, they go from, a nice house or apartment, like where their parents have, taken care of them and stuff. And they end up in breeze block.
It's a character building experience.
It definitely is. And you should expect to have some monastic, minimalism if you're these dorm rooms that were doubles, right? So it looks like they usually had two students living in one little room, right? And built-in desk, one clothing rack, and the bathrooms. This was, I suppose this was moderate luxury in 1965, but you shared the bathroom with the other room across the hall, as it were, across the bathroom, right? So one toilet for 4 people.
That's what I had too. Same thing. My dorm was built in the 60s.
Yeah. So these, this is the group dynamic experience that we put our students in so that they can learn to talk. And we relive it every year at Kalamazoo.
Relived.
Compared with, of course, when I got home on Sunday to find, of course, our first piece of evidence that my colleagues at University of Chicago had written a letter that was coming out on Monday. I think they posted it on the 13th, right? Yesterday, 2 days ago. Posted on 13th. What day is today? The 15th. Yes, they were. 15th. They'd been collecting signatures over the weekend to post the letter through the campus newspaper, the Maroon, protesting. See what I did there? Protesting that the president had ordered the campus police to dismantle the camp Tuesday, a week ago. Because they didn't want the students. Wait. The students have been sleeping in tents instead of their dorms. I do think
the students have been sleeping in tents. I mean, they weren't all students, but
we still have no evidence of that. I can't believe that you believe that they're not all students. They were. I have nothing.
Horribly cynical.
Nothing in my documentation suggests that there was anybody there except our students, who in normal circumstances are sleeping in their dorm rooms. Having their minimalist experience. They say our dorm rooms have been built mainly in the more recent decades, and so they're luxurious.
Yeah,
these are up there with cruise ship level. I guess. I've not seen any of our dorm rooms. I have seen some of the ones in some of the oldest dorms. They were a little bit more minimalist in their amenities. The ones that were built in 1912 or 20 or whenever they were 100 years ago, right? The true medieval monastic style ones. I've seen some of those.
Funny thing is, they probably look nicer than the 1960s ones did, because they were building everything so sterile, in the 60s, and utilitarian. I mean, no curved ceilings or doorways, no real wood.
Well, and rightly so, because those students should come to campus and suffer. Wait, no. Okay, no, look, so I at this point, I'm super confused, right? Because we build buildings so the students can sleep in them. They're dormitories, or sleeping rooms. We at the University of Chicago, this one's not showing any of our dorm rooms. The picture on screen right now is showing some of the tents. That we spent a lot of donors' money and a lot of tuition, I suppose, over the decades, building very beautiful dorms. And, the oldest ones have all sorts of Gothic ornamentation and they look like they're medieval. Wait, do we want them sleeping in medieval conditions? Like, which medieval conditions should they be in? Tents are kind of medieval, don't you think? Actually, maybe we should have them in tents. Maybe we should keep them in tents. Forget the dorm rooms. Put them in tents.
Isn't that ironic? If you did that, they would say it was inhuman, right? So there was a sheriff in Arizona that did that to prisoners years ago. He wanted to make sure they didn't want to come back. Worked.
Oh my gosh. What have we done? Our students, we abandoned our students to live in tents.
No, that's not quite right.
What? You're saying that? No, wait, I'm really confused now. So we spend a lot of money making buildings so that they have places to sleep, so that while they're here on campus, they can engage in various speech activities, like going to class and giving speeches at debates. I've been very busy the last few weeks because it's been end of year and I've been invited to a variety of things. So one thing I was invited to was the College Republicans, and they met in a building. It was a house that the Institute of Politics has. And so we had a chat there with speech. And then the next night I was invited to the Burke Society, which is the debate society named after Edmund Burke, populated largely by law students who I think probably don't sleep in our dorms. I think they have apartments around the neighborhood otherwise. But they were and there may have been alcohol served there to the adults. Some of their speeches went off the rails really fast. And I think it was because there was all the alumni of the debate society. And so we were in one of the dining halls having speech. And then, I've been friends now for several years and one of the faculty mentors for the Chicago Thinker. And we had a meeting last night where they spoke. So there's speech there. And then usually the students go back to their dorms and sleep in their sleeping rooms so that they're refreshed, so that they can come back out and do more speech.
That can't be right.
Why not?
Well, because that letter said they couldn't speak unless the president took back what he said and let these protests continue, because that was speech. And you're suppressing speech unless you let them camp in the middle of the quad and disrupt everybody else's classes with as much noise as you want. I'm
sure you're confused. Here. They
I can see why everybody would be confused after reading what that letter said.
Well, a lot of people signed it. I at least 300 or so. It's something like that. It's like 10 pages of signatures if you printed them all out right now. And I think they're actually still asking for more signatures. So this is a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my academic colleagues. They say they're the instructors at the University of Chicago. So they've included tenured track faculty, tenured faculty, we have various levels of postdocs and fellows and instructional professors, but everyone involved in teaching students. And you're saying that they said in this letter that, wait, no, what did they say? That not letting the students sleep in tents means they can't speak.
Well, they were suppressing their freedom of speech.
I think we need to read this letter a little bit, and you're going to help me understand this, because clearly I'm really out of my depth. Okay, so the title, if you want to look it up on the Maroon site, is the Open Letter to President Olivier Santos concerning the encampment and the Calvin Report. Oh, okay, sorry, sober footnote here. The Calvin Report was
Calvin or was it Clavin or Calvin?
It's Calvin. And there is an E in it, as opposed to Clavin, in which there are no E's. I did listen to enough of Andrew Clavin's things, like Klaven. There are no E's in Clavin. Okay, but there are E's in Calvin. It's Claven. And it's a report that was written back in the 60s during the 1968 protests when the students occupied one of the administration buildings. And I realize I should have brought the text to that, but the principle of it is the university in situations like this. In 1968, they were protesting the Vietnam War. In situations like these, when there are, heated issues of public concern, the institution as an institution will not take sides in the debate. The premise being, Edward Levy was the president at that point. The premise being that the institution needs to not take sides so that there can be sides taken among the members of the community. And a lot of the debate over the last several years has been to the effect of exactly what counts as the institution. Like, where do you draw the line between, okay, the administration clearly is, but like our divisional school divisions, right? Well, yes, they sort of speak administratively for the institution. What about departments? Can department make statements, for example, about supporting BLM, which my department did, put a statement up about, and we've been debating over the last several years. It's like, at what point is it a group that turns into the institutional entity? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but the letter, they seem to be saying we are the institution, and you need to change. Meaning the president needs to change to reflect that. That was the tone. I thought.
You are clear. You are clearly not in higher education if you were able to see through that so clearly. You're right. I mean, okay, so they have signed themselves as instructional faculty, but technically, because they're all signing individually, they are not an institutional group. But of course, because they're signing as instructional faculty, oh golly, I had not considered this. At what level does a group of faculty signing a collective statement become a spokesperson for the institution, which is of course what they're upset with President Oliver Santos for being, because they don't want what he just did to represent the institution. They want what they're saying to represent the institution. Oh my gosh, Casey, you're a genius. Or maybe quite capable of seeing through
maybe it was just transparent, especially because they're trying to get as many people to sign on as possible who would not normally sign a letter of that importance because they didn't have the correct title to carry the weight. Their title didn't have the same weight as, like a full tenured, professor or something.
Most of the people signing it are the tenure faculty. There's some that haven't, and there's often discussion in this sorts of situation where we want to make sure our most vulnerable, which means the ones that don't have tenure, and therefore are on temporary in the sense of maybe 3 or 5 years contracts and or renewable contracts, and we're often as a group quite concerned about what happens if a younger person, one of our, not the postdocs because they're not technically on renewable contracts, but maybe the instructional professors or some other kind of teaching position, that if they took a strong position to which other people on the faculty objected, would they risk losing their job? And there's always always this conversation at this level of we can't put our junior faculty at risk. Although you noticed correctly that some of the junior people are signing this letter. And
I wonder, you have to wonder if they've been coerced too for that very reason, because the professors are going to be the ones recommending them for jobs. The full professors. So,
Casey, stop it! You're seeing through this too clearly. Yes, exactly. The coercion works both ways with these kinds of lists. I wrote about this 5 or 7, 8 years ago when everybody was signing lists when we were back in the day when we were at the University of Chicago and we didn't have safe spaces. And I think there was a collective letter to the effect of how horrible it was that President Zimmer did something or other at that point. And if you didn't sign the list, you were visibly not on that list, right? So it's like the divisiveness, the list itself creates that. If we make this statement, everybody signs it, and then you as a junior person see that all your senior faculty in your field have signed it and you don't sign it, aren't you then in trouble too?
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, you're toast. Yeah.
Well,
it's a very political atmosphere, isn't it?
Yes, incredibly political. And
It's unfortunate.
Well, the irony of it being, of course, as you pointed out, that they are claiming that they speak more fully for the institution than Paul, as president, speaks for the institution.
Based on what?
The number of people they got to sign.
Exactly.
Oh, no,
yeah.
They're outrage, right? So
might makes right. That's what it is, and that's why they're trying to get as many signatures as they can, because it makes them. Yeah, but I look powerful. Aren't you afraid of me? That's what it looks like to an outsider like myself.
I'm just gonna keep laughing. Let us share some of this letter with our audience so that they know why you are having this amazing moment of insight. Okay, so. And she's right. Everything Casey's saying is right now. And I had not articulated it so bluntly to myself. I was all worried about how this is speech or not speech, and she's like cut to the problem instantly. Which, yes, okay. So, as instructors at the dear President Ali Santos, as instructors at the University of Chicago, so they are in fact labeling themselves as institutionally associated in this situation, which then clearly means they want to speak for the institution, which signing individually, technically they aren't in our terms, right? We say that the deans can't make statements of this sort. The departments aren't supposed to collectively make statements of this sort, precisely for the reason which we've rehearsed over and over and over again for the last decade or more here, that you don't want the junior people to feel bullied into saying one thing or the other. But the problem is the existence of the list in the first place is a demonstration of how many people are on which version of the argument. Okay. As instructors at the University of Chicago, we object in the strongest possible terms. I'm stuck at that point.
Zipping my lip. Go ahead.
Oh no, keep talking. It's very insightful. I mean,
the strongest possible terms would be to resign and leave because I'm not going to work for this institution, but they're not going to do that, are they? Anyway, go on.
I'm just going to read, and she's going to say wise things. Okay, you're right. If they were actually that upset, they would quit. Because that's what bargaining power do they have? Removal of their own labor. Right. And saying, and the thing is, if they actually, this is the problem in academia, right? It's like you are doing this on the basis of prestige. They're claiming it to be worried that, by the time they get to the end, they say, you've blown it. We're doomed. I can do it too. Sorry. Casey's
they're still cashing the checks.
Casey's warmed me up, right? No, but say that they've accused him of giving in to the panic of pure institutions, and
it's not panic.
Basically, yes. If you don't do what we say, we're losing our prestige, which is often the underlying sort of claim in all of these things, and the power that they have. This is the specific power that they have in the kind of private institution that we're in, is that we're all individually hired. This is what's actually quite terrifying and difficult about it. The whole thing is that you basically have no support from your colleagues about things that happen to you, because the hiring is always of us as individuals. We're free agents in our negotiations. Which means there is no collective. There are those of us who have sufficient prestige in our particular fields for other people in our particular fields to suggest that we should be hired. But it's a delicate thing. It's like they want the institution to have prestige so that their prestige counts. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost like they're saying, if you want to use our prestige, you have to increase your prestige, then you have to meet our demands.
Yep.
Yeah.
In the strongest possible terms. Okay. To your decision to deploy armed police against a peaceful encampment. I'm never going to get through this. A peaceful.
I saw them shooting. I saw. No, I'm sorry. Just kidding. I didn't.
Okay, so there's more. I have heard colleagues suggest that, that they were there that in the wee hours, right, and that the police had batons that they raised, and their voices they definitely raised. They yelled at people to get them out.
Wonder what bothered them more.
I'm really gonna get in trouble if I keep talking.
Sorry, I'll shut up.
I'm real. Oh no, it's just okay. Against a peaceful encampment of our students in the early hours of Tuesday, May 7th. We object in particular to the administration's weaponization of the university's much vaunted Calvin report and Chicago principles. The Chicago principles were articulated 10 years ago as a sort of a explanation of why the Calvin report is the thing that we abide by, this institutional neutrality. Okay, so weaponization of the university's much vaunted Calvin report and Chicago principles, which it has used to vindicate its decision to take a deliberate stance against the peaceful encampment, and ultimately to order the police to break it up. In choosing this course of action, the administration has elected to abandon its own principles of neutrality and the protection of free speech. It is as if sincere, thoughtful, and passionate disagreement were a mark of moral failure among our students. Thoughts?
Students, right?
Yes. No, they don't acknowledge that there were external active participants in the situation. I mean, the rhetoric in this is quite colorful. In the classical terms of colorful, imagery. Right? War imagery, yes, exactly.
Yeah, so
armed,
weaponized,
peaceful,
armed, neutrality.
Right.
Yeah, this is all terms of war.
And weaponization of our principles to go against, and the thing is, over and over again, this peaceful encampment, right?
Yeah.
Since the encampment began, the administration has turned to the Calvin report to restrict rather than protect speech, to vindicate a narrow. Okay, I just footnote here, the worst thing you can be called at University of Chicago is narrow. Just saying. It's like if you want to kill someone's, joy at the research project that they've been laboring on for decades, just say, isn't that a bit narrow?
So yes, by design it has to be. But something to accomplish. You can't just
no. At Chicago, we don't do narrow things. It has to be expansive and generative and never narrow, for goodness sake.
Yeah, and always in need of more funding because you're never going to get to the end. Sorry.
Well, I did do. There's a blog post on Fancy Bear Prayer from back in the beginning of the blog, which is entitled "Isn't That a Bit Narrow?" And I explained why this is such a kill shot for people at the University of Chicago. So narrow, you're narrow. You haven't considered narrow, limited and self-interested interpretation of its principles, and to assert its rights. This is way more fun than I thought it was going to be. To assert, to assert its rights over those of the students. Okay, so. The confusion of premises is so in so many different places, right? So they call them out for being moral. It's like that. It's as if you're blaming them for being morally wrong. Which okay. The one thing I know about this is it wasn't speech, which you've already said. But anyway, this appeal reached the height of its absurdity when you explained in the Wall Street Journal that it was the Calvin report's principle of institutional neutrality that actually required the administration to walk away from negotiations and extinguish the student's speech.
Negotiations.
Right.
There's another one.
Negotiations, right. Here, the Calvin report's principles are twisted beyond recognition to justify the refusal of dialogue in favor of the forceful repression of dissent. The order for the campus police to suppress students' speech was not a neutral act under the terms of the Calvin report. Okay.
It's just so petulant, the tone.
Well, the tone is classic. Academic grievance speech. Although but the thing is, if you keep going and it keeps like the whole point is they use the phrase several times: suppress student speech. Suppress student speech. The Calvin report counsels the university provide the widest possible it's not narrow, wide, right? Widest possible leeway for protest and dissent, As far as we understand, the encampment did not lead, and the thing is, there have been definite reports of disruption of regular activities, which we didn't make it. We didn't make a fuss. We didn't.
Well, that's why they're there. If they weren't going to disrupt anybody, they wouldn't be there. It's absurd.
You are proving why academia has made itself a laughing stock. Oh my gosh. Yes, this is so plain. Seriously, I'm 3-4 layers too far in this to see what you're seeing so clearly. Keep going. Yes, they meant to disrupt, right? Otherwise, what's the point of doing it? Because you want to get...
They're also talking...
Go ahead.
They're talking way too much in this letter. The reason they're using such colorful language repetitively is because they don't have a leg to stand on. It's kind of obvious. And they're just angry, and they want everybody to know they're angry. And maybe they think there's a possibility of getting the president to reverse his decision, but I suspect they already know he's not going to. This is just grandstanding. Yeah, and in a previous life, I've heard a lot of bad attorneys making similar arguments. It's like the more they talk, the less less of a point they actually have.
Yeah.
But
no, I did feel I only read the letter like really carefully to prep for this, and it's very long and makes the same point multiple times.
Yeah, it does. It's the language is key here, because they're actually just they're just wanting to make rhetorical kill shots. Of course, they're not making any kill shots because it's more like bird shot. It's going everywhere.
Yeah.
Well,
I stand by the fundamental problem here is that the bait and switch that they've done with speech, right? Because they as you're pointing out, I mean, it's meant to be disruptive. So at this point, they're saying, as far as we understand, the encampment did not lead to the cancellation of any classes. Access to Levy Hall, that's our administration building, was not restricted. The area of the quad that the students were camping on remained traversable. They didn't put the tents. They didn't put the tents on the paths, but they did put one of their barriers up, so you had to walk around it in the mud to get along.
Yeah, but you tried to walk through and you got stopped.
I actually no. What I tried to do was go in and talk to them, and that's where the speech part comes fails utterly.
They stopped
me from speaking.
They repressed your speech
and hustled me out. Well, I was there to invite them to come pray, right? And
hustle, that was a good word. She thought she was doing that.
Yeah, you saw it. One woman came and talked to me and got me out, and then proceeded to tell me nothing. Right? She explained that they were...
No, her job was to get you away.
They were the popular university. When I was asking whether she was a member of the university, she said we're the popular university, which means they had like taken over territory in our quad.
Yeah.
And when, I was asking her, she didn't actually explain any of their positions or anything like that. Just that this is our popular university and we're here to learn. Right. So, okay. But, they say, if I've not finished that sentence, but hold that thought, right? If this administration cannot commit itself to the core mission of the institution of the university as defined by the Calvin Report, the discovery, improvement, and dissemination of knowledge, then the Calvin Report loses all meaning. And what I wrote in my own notes is, what knowledge? I learned nothing from that conversation that I had with the one woman who was part of the camp. So she didn't do her part.
Dissemination of the Department of Knowledge. I mean... Yeah, right. It's like a massive bait and switch. People go to your university for the excellent teaching and reputation and research. They don't go to hear a bunch of campers, LARPing as warriors on some medieval battlefield, waving their flags and having their shields, and it's just so ridiculous. They look like a joke. Sorry.
This article, all you're doing is echoing all the comments on X, right? Because when the Maroon posted this on their Twitter feed, X feed doesn't work. The Twitter feed, I mean, they got a lot of shares and likes and things like that, but all of the comments I saw were going like, "Oh, really?" Right?
We've seen over the past
people looking at what's going on are just saying this is. It's not dissemination of knowledge. It's not an actual argument,
Yeah.
right? And
that's the infuriating part when he talks like that. It's denying reality yet again,
yeah,
right? Because everybody over the past couple of years have had, just the scummiest people taking over cities and putting up camps and doing nasty things. Not that the people in the Quad were doing that at the University of Chicago, but if it looks just the same as what you've seen everywhere else, you're going to have less patience for it anyway. And I think most people didn't have a whole lot of patience for claiming we're in the free university, the public university, the happy unicorn arts university. That's what university we go to.
right.
It's just like it's a bunch of gaslighting. It's like, were you going to believe me? You are lying eyes. And additional frustration for me, maybe many others, is that I didn't go to University of Chicago. I have a lot of respect for that university. It's one of the ones I wish I could have gone to. A lot of people do. People have respect for higher education. And when they see it taken over by people who are just expressing themselves instead of doing the teaching jobs they were supposed to do, and then pretending that everybody there was a student, and then pretending that students' speech is being repressed, it just makes me angry, because I think they're tearing down these once great institutions. We need these institutions. I want these institutions, and I think we need these institutions. You need them for civilization. And so they're just, this is not your plaything. Stop doing that. Okay, my speech is over.
Keep going. Well, I'm not going to suppress your speech, certainly. And the thing that was so they say that the university maintain an active presence of both police and security guards. Okay. Further, the administration's own report of the Ad Hoc Committee on Protest and Dissent in 2013 noted that, quote, vocal protest and demonstrations in particular are by their nature disruptive, and concluded that, quote, such incidental disruption should not be regarded as a violation of university policy. I don't remember what that was in relation to. 2013 is a while ago. The administration's conclusion that encampment as a protest strategy is inherently too disruptive is simply to say that it disfavors this form of speech. And that's what I kept seeing, right? It's
and that's been a legal trend in the United States for years, where people are conflating speech with actions.
Right.
This is why pornography was called speech, pornographic movies. You're repressing our speech. I'm like, well, this isn't a speech you're giving, or a dialogue you're having. It's a piece of film you created. It's a thing. It's an object. It's not a speech. But the Supreme Court said, oh, yeah, that's a speech. And so people kind of took that and expanded it into things like, well, now I'm going to camp. That's speech. Anything I do and an action I do is a speech. It's part of my freedom of speech because I'm expressing myself. Okay, well, you can express yourself without preventing somebody else from expressing their desire to walk to their class and hear it without you screaming through a bullhorn,
right,
or having a party. Because you don't have the right to, through your speech, disrupt somebody else's speech, right? Because if they're going to class, isn't that their speech? Oh, no, that's just a class. Why? Because you said so? So this is situational, related to what you want?
Well, I mean, in my colleagues' understanding, I think it's the moral weight of the issue, right? Is that they, because this is a important moral issue, they are allowed to disrupt. Okay, Casey's frozen in horror, right? It slowed you down, suppressed your speech, right? Well, the thing is, it is true. It's like if the encampment was what suppressed, if taking the encampment down is what suppressed the speech, why weren't they back out on the quad talking yesterday, the day before? I think it rained. It rained really hard on Monday, so maybe not that day. But I think here she is. The thing is, I think it obviously the issue continues. And we're still talking about the encampment because people are still worried about what's going on in Gaza. And I have colleagues. I do have colleagues, thoughtful colleagues on both sides of this debate, this actual, speech not the debate about the encampments, the debate about what's going on in Israel. And certainly some of the things that I've seen people sharing and talking about and stuff have helped for me to understand better the not just the emotions on both sides, those are pretty obvious, but the which stories people are telling about what happened in what circumstances. And I mean, it's a lot of who broke faith questions, which is stressful and difficult. But I didn't learn any of that from the camp, and I did certainly wasn't given a proper introduction to the problem by the woman who talked to me for 10 minutes. She just wanted me out.
Well, she was a perfect example of what that was all about. It wasn't about talking about Palestine or Israel. It was just about disrupting, being disruptive, getting a lot of attention, getting a lot of photo opportunities, which I think the entire thing was about. They wanted to film for as long as possible. So you ask, why weren't they there on Tuesday when it stopped raining? Well, because there was no camera.
There was no backdrop anymore. They needed the stage.
Right, there's nothing to film.
Yeah.
The performance was over. This was not speech. This was a performance.
Well, that they sunk themselves. They should have been back on the quad. I mean, they should, if it was speech, they should have been back on the quad on Wednesday, last week, talking, handing out leaflets, inviting people to a meeting,
where's the fun in
setting
that?
up a debate. Well,
right. It's not a party anymore.
I mean,
it's work, right? Because real dialogue is work. It's one-on-one. Even with strangers you meet, you talk to them.
That's a very good point. Actually talking to people is really stressful.
It is. Yeah.
Because you want to change people's minds. And you want to be persuasive and show them information that will help them think about something difficult and emotionally charged.
And make sure that you can remain calm in the face of, sometimes they'll be so emotionally angry that they might hate you at first and just want to be angry and yell.
Right.
And if you want to change their minds, you can't do that. Right. It's real work. This kind of dialogue is real work. And a demonstration, an actual one, a protest saying, we don't like what the university is doing. Well, we're going to protest against this. It's a day. Okay. You were heard in that type of venue, but then after that comes real work. You have to actually change people's minds. That doesn't change anyone's mind. It wasn't meant to. It was just meant to be performative.
So I have some of the colleagues who signed the letter in this picture, and they're having a press conference. And so, I mean, the visuals here, right? We're getting so it's very visual sort of experience, which it's like, what's ironic about it, we talked about this at length last week. It's like the universities are useful for this kind of performance because they are visually striking. That this is they're standing in front of the administration building here, which is our least lovely building. Just ironic because in most universities the admin building is the one that's the prettiest, right? The administration's
gets all the money.
Taken over the oldest, coolest looking building. That we purposely built these beautiful cloisters for this kind of, bring people in and have different kinds of thought because you're surrounded by architecture. I mean, they actually did this purposely in these neo-Gothic style buildings. That if you put the students in a context in which they look medieval, and harken back to the founding of the universities as a place of disputation and contemplation, and they will be elevated in their thinking by their surroundings, right? So it's like the universities themselves are designed this way, like the duck pond at Kalamazoo, because we understand the significant relationship between environment and intellectual exercise, right?
Yeah.
And so it's
very, very Benedictine, isn't it?
It is. It's very, very Benedictine. Your bodily self in these circumstances is going to be transformed by your posture and your speaking or not speaking and your behavior with others in your environment and all of that. It all goes into it. So in that sense, my colleagues are not wrong. The university is designed to be something more than just speech, but where they're falling there, that's like, what I, and you have pointed out quite clearly, it's like, this is a slipperiness of categories. Like, you're talking about freedom of speech in this environment designed to foster a particular kind of speech, because you're disrupting it with bodily activities that are different from the thing that it was designed to foster. We're a university. I think I didn't say this properly last time. We're a university. Oh no, I didn't say it in my speech to my colleagues. We're a university who has no proper stadium, because our president, Hutchins, made jokes about how if he felt the desire to exercise, he'd lie down until it went away, and
I like
it's like, we're famous as the place where the first controlled nuclear was performed by Fermi and his rogue guys under the football stadium, because it wasn't being used, right? It's like and now they took that building down and put the library there, and there is a stadium, but it's somewhere else off the main quad. That I've now lost track of what I was thinking. I mean, we're a university that's so allergic to any form of something other than just standing around talking that our sports teams, people barely know we have them. We do have a football team.
I didn't know you
we
had
do. And, in the flag guys, the man leading the 3 of 4 of them that, were willing to walk when he said, let's go, right? There wasn't actually a big group of them to start with, because there were, most of the students aren't even used to doing that, right? He's one of our football players, right? So it's like this minimal level of practice being in any kind of physically, performative or challenging situation. Most, what we do is stand around or sit around and talk. And so the way they're trying to, in the letter, make it sound like the encampment was about talking. It's like, no, it wasn't. It was about doing something radically different from what you usually do. And you're trying to describe it in the terms that you work in our community to be approved activity, but it was a completely different form of activity. Bring back the football team. I mean, we barely have a football team. Come on. We do have a football team. I don't know what division or anything that we compete in, because we're not like Notre Dame, for example, down the road, which highlights the fact of its football teams. Like, whole towns given over to the fact of the football game. We have football games so you don't even know they're happening, because it's not something that our university highlights.
Oh, yeah, I kind of agree with that. The university shouldn't highlight their sports. I think they should highlight their academics.
I agree, but having people without any physical training is another thing that's an interesting.
Yeah, that's a different problem.
An interesting problem, right? Okay, so we have spent the past hour simply talking, right? And so to remind you that this was, it's like the camp was a different kind of a thing from a speech, flat out, right? Let's just please say that out loud. Colleagues, guess what? It wasn't speech. It was fundamentally something different.
Yeah. It was a demonstration, which is a physical thing. It was not an exchange of ideas. You made your case the first day. Okay, after every moment after that, you're taking up space. It's just disruption.
There is such a thing as in Aristotle, a demonstratio is a speech thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What
now I've forgotten. It's like there's I've forgotten in my categories when he's talking about different kinds of dialectic. And unfortunately,
does he mean to demonstrate what he's talking about?
He means it verbally. So, I mean, what's interesting is protest you can do simply verbally. Demonstration you can do simply verbally. But what you're saying is, the demonstration form is, in fact, obviously not something that's simply verbal. And I will say, that, the sober me not giggling about this whole thing version of it is, this is an interesting anthropological problem. At what point are we saying, because we are embodied beings or incarnate, as we Christians say, right? Because we exist as body and soul, the things that our bodies do matter a lot. And that's, one of the things that the people who signed the letter are trying to heighten is this sense of physical danger that they feel that the students were in. Although they didn't land on that as hard as weaponization, right? That makes it sound like they're physically threatened.
They're highlighting that overblown presumption of fear and danger on the students' part. They didn't look scared to me. Many of the pictures I've seen, they looked rather belligerent. But,
well, you weren't there on Tuesday morning. Clearly, they were terrified.
He's highlighting that because of the fact that it wasn't a demonstration. He needs to deflect attention away from that. By I'm talking about the person who wrote this letter.
Yeah, it is one person.
They have to deflect attention away from the fact that their protest and their demonstration was pretty much over the first day, and every other day after that, they were just being belligerent and trying to force people to do what they wanted. They were just taking part of the campus hostage and campus life hostage.
Yes, I agree. So it's like if you can see this, and my colleagues whose lives have been dedicated to making arguments with speech can't see this. What's going on?
Well, I think they probably can. I think they can. I think this is an angry letter. This is there's power in numbers. Let's get as many signatures as we can, and then we'll force his hand. It's like, well, you're going to have to talk to the alumni, and you're going to have to talk to the students and their parents. The ones that are actually keeping the other people that are also keeping this university going, right? Or any university. It's not just the president and you. It's a whole ecosystem of people that support it in different ways. And it just seems to be it looks like a temper tantrum. I should be in charge. You made a stupid decision, and look at how many people agree with me. Here's a letter. Here's all their signatures. Do what I want. Now do what I want. That's what it looks like from an outsider. Well,
I mean, you're right. What they want him to do is do the divestment stuff, which he can't do because that's not actually his job. I think the trustees are in charge of the investment decisions. I don't think the president can do that. But
and the president, and no president should do that just because a group of people demanded it.
Well, which is the whole point of the Calvin report, to say the university is not going, although they bring up the example of slavery, right? If there were slavery being used, would you divest or not, or support it?
If slavery being used, would you work there?
You're right. You called their bluff pretty swiftly at the beginning there. It's like the strongest possible terms would be I quit. So, anyway, so but the thing is, the faculty are deeply invested in this as a something, right? And we're saying it's not the things that they're saying it is, the rhetorically things that they're using it to say. It's like, what is it, right? What's the root of what this encampment actually meant? We see it. You come down the path, and you go. They built the tent. They put the tents up around the paths, and so some of these photographs, it looks like you're doing a windy rural thing through the middle of the tent city, right? So that they're it's a kind of, well, you've already said it's medieval. It's like who else used tents in the Middle Ages? I mean, like what you're saying, they're belligerent. It's like I saw, and if I were staging this, I'd say this looks like a tournament to me, because it looks like that's where the tent,
the flags, the
tents, right here. Yeah. You're going to bring your knights to the field. I mean, it's so deliciously ironic for me, because their whole premise is it's dangerous. You brought you sent your knights against our innocent, peaceful students, and you set up a tournament. Right. You've literally set up a tournament encampment, and they say, "Oh, that's a military thing." It's like, no, the kind of like tent. Like you've got a tent, you've got they set up fences around the encampment, right? So they were actually blocking access to. You couldn't walk through these, and no, without
starting a fight, right? Because you'd be knocking people's tents over, and that's what they want. That's what they wanted. That's why I keep using the word belligerent, because they were provoking a reaction.
Well, they definitely wanted to
And I
provoke a
think,
reaction. They're there
yeah,
to issue a challenge. It was like they're there to have a duel, right? They had a food tent, right? So and apparently they were being catered by local supporters, right? So they actually had nice food, allegedly. Some of my colleagues were saying, "Oh yes, there were tasty snacks there," and I'm like, "What?" Okay, so is this
it's a party anyway.
right? But the thing is this meant to be an ascetic? I mean, what some would say is this is meant to be in sympathy with the people in Gaza whose homes are being bombed
And who have no food.
and who have no food.
Maybe you should not be eating. Maybe you should be fasting.
See, the monastic level, it's like which version of encampment was this? Because if they were, oh, I don't know, crusaders. Yes,
Like that term.
well, what was funny was we had a meeting. Okay, so after this letter went up, there was a meeting of the faculty only, which we weren't allowed to record or take photographs in or anything like that, to talk about what was going on. I report out, it was a very good meeting. I think there was a lot of good conversation out of it. Now I forgot what I was saying. Oh yes, but I do know what I said, and I think I can say what I said. And I started making some analogies, and I know I understand there were gasps when I mentioned that it would be helpful if our students had actual like martial art training so they'd stay calm in these situations.
Oh yeah, no, people have a fundamental misunderstanding about that. I had this discussion with a friend of mine once whose husband wanted their son. He was a very big kid and at a very young age wanted him to take martial arts. She says, "No, I don't want to do that. That's violent." I said, "You don't understand. People are going to pick on him because he's big.
Right.
If he has training, he'll know not to take the bait.
Right.
Because he'll have the confidence to know he doesn't need to."
Yes. Right. So you've set up what looks to Casey and me as like a military encampment, or at least a tournament encampment or something like that. And so you go to the Renaissance Fair, tents are where the knights are.
It's the Ren Fair.
You go to the Ren Fair, the tents are where the knights are. So you're setting it up that way. And that they were, what we talked about last week, they were actually asking for supplies and things like that. This was not an ascetic camp. This was, as you have been saying, a party. Even to the effect of like the nighttime scene is apparently in the Maroon reporting of things that happened over the course of the week. They had dances and music and chants.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's literally camp, guys. We said this last week.
Or like a music festival, right?
Ooh, you think? So some of the things that came out of the faculty discussion on Monday, when people were, the people who were in favor of the encampment continuing indefinitely, which is a little tricky because alumni weekend is already going to be this weekend, and they're putting up those tents. So the alumni can come and have their, remembrance of what it was, how much fun it was being on campus. That I was unclear to me, and it's unclear to me from the people who signed the letter, like, when were you going to leave this camp? Like, when were they going to pick up the camp voluntarily? Oh, well, no, we were going to stay until, the university did what we wanted. It's like,
yeah,
but they're saying they won't. So, like, what, it's designed for a stalemate.
Yeah, it's part, oh, what was I going to say? Well, they're holding the campus hostage, the normal campus life hostage. It's part that, and it's part it wouldn't be, it's not blackmail, it's not the right word.
Well, a siege is what people have been saying. It's like you've literally
extortion. It's like,
this is the other place you'd have tents in the Middle Ages, right? In the siege around the city that you put up your tents.
You want us, they're squatters. You want us gone? Give us what we want, right? Otherwise, the camp gets dirtier and louder and less pleasant, and people don't want to come here.
Right. I think we have, well, anyway, I'm not going to go into the political on this thing. Okay, so these students, instead of living in their dorms, are living in the tents. They're having parties, which they get to have in the dorms too. So it was clear that my colleagues who were in favor of this as an experience kept talking about A as an experience, when several of them use the word utopian, right? It's like, oh, I was seeing the possibility. They love talking in these terms, like seeing the possibility of different forms of arrangement and agreement and negotiation and you know and
That's great. I should get a camp a tent and a couple of friends of mine and park in their living room and have a party every night in utopia in their house. Why not?
I don't know. I mean, does the university have any rights? They said the students don't have rights. They said that the university denied the students' rights to assert its rights
To what?
its rights over those of the students. This is all very medieval language too, because rights are things that you have, particularly in cities, because you've lived there according to the rules of the city and have been granted citizenship eventually.
So they have a right to camp in the middle of campus.
Well, no, the letter keeps pushing on the point that they have a right to speech, which has been,
But they're camping.
But they're camping.
Camping was the problem, not the speech.
Okay, well, okay, so they had the camp. Here they are now. Now we've got some students now, and we've got a line of banners and a line of boards, which they used as shields. They stood up against the other people with banners. Banners and boards.
Yeah.
This
They just did. Yeah. They just look like the He-Man Woman Haters Club. It's everything's like they're in their tree fort, keeping everybody out.
You're making me wish I'd have joined this
infantile.
camp and had this experience. I mean, it's clearly quite bonding for them that they're able to. We have here, they're locking arms in a line. I can't tell whether this round thing that the guy has.
Are they they're playing Red Rover. That's sweet. Oh, it's fun. It's another Gen X.
I need to bring you here. Say, here's my friend who has a very interesting take on what this camp is, and you guys need to
I'm going to set up a tent right in the middle of the quad, and I'm going to enjoy speech, and I'll be a part of the popular university. If anybody asks.
But you're not one of our students, so you're not allowed to declare property rights.
I am a student. I am always learning.
Oh, that's right. You
not
are.
Call me a student.
Okay, I'm pretty sure you're not allowed, but they're allowed to put up tents and lock arms and play Red Rover. Okay, so I was thinking about all this because it is clearly a very powerful experience for everyone. And what I think happened, I'm not sure that we used to have a bonding experience like this on campus, which was called Scav Hunt, which
That sounds
used to happen on this same
week.
weekend, right? The week I didn't even know it existed for ages because I'd be at Kalamazoo and it would happen that weekend, and it was they'd have incredibly elaborate items to find on this scavenger hunt. My husband used to make Lego robots for them because they found out he could do that, and we still have one of them. It was it writes the name of the house that he made it for. Snitchcock, right? It can write the robot that writes. Often the scav hunt things included, they had to do some kind of elaborate road trip, so that was a bonding experience. So students seem to be able to come up with, uncomfortable communal activities that have high emotions because they're competitive. But this is what we had instead of scav hunt this year, I think. Maybe scav hunt happened. It happened while I was away at the conference. It did seem to me though, and this is probably what will get me into even more trouble than we're already in trouble because I'm not taking this seriously enough, given what's happening in Gaza. Is that it fundamentally seemed to me that the whole thing was designed to excite exactly the kind of reaction it did, which we've talked about. And that it's a tournament like that in the sense that a good deal of the high emotion, experiential, utopian frisson that they enjoyed in this learning experience was because it was under threat of being dismantled. Duh.
So they needed a threat to get the thrill.
Well,
what you're saying?
Yeah, that's why we do martial arts, isn't it? You need to learn how to defend yourself against someone hitting you or
That's
stabbing
true.
you with something. I mean, it's why you do sports. The risk of losing.
Yeah. No participation trophies. Huh?
Well, this one apparently had one, but the thing is that I mean, this is psychologically fundamentally the problem in everything that I'm seeing in it is that what my colleagues who I don't think do enough sports are missing in their description of this as a speech event, which it's not, is the I gonna say the necessity of stochastic situations in order to engender understanding. And I tried to say that as complicated as I could. You need some risk in order to learn. And ironically, I think everybody learned a great deal from this encampment. I do have colleagues who are very upset with President Paul for not taking it down the day it happened. They're very, very upset, and they're upset by the things that were chanted over the course of the week. They're upset by, they were upset by the noise, which was, large crowds yelling are unnerving.
Yeah.
I don't like them. Well,
that's the intimidation factor. Yeah. They know the people that organize these types of things know that they're trying to put pressure on you and your colleagues and the students to put pressure on the president to do what they want.
Right.
That's what that's about. It's nasty.
And it is frightening.
It's not speech.
Even if you intellectually know that it's pretty unlikely that anything's going to happen to you, it's frightening.
Mm-hmm.
And it was I certainly appreciate. Well, the thing is, I didn't witness any of this myself, so I don't know. Right? It's like that there were certainly there are Jewish students and faculty that reported. Well, one that the things kept getting taken down, so there was a kind of capture the flag problem of the Israeli Jewish students would put flags up and they'd get torn down or torn apart or something like that. So, but I don't think they were guarding them the whole time. The camp people were there. I don't think anybody other than the police, when they took the camp down, did anything to the camp. I don't know that there were, counter spray painters or anything on the walls.
Yeah.
Literally the one thing that happened was when the guys wanted to walk through the camp because it was on the path to the flagpole to put the flag back up. And that was literally the one thing that happened. Nothing else happened.
Right, well, they were just expressing themselves using their free speech. So shouldn't the signatories of this letter not have had a problem with that? But I'll bet some of them did.
With the flag boys, whom they kept calling in the faculty meeting things from white nationalist to white supremacist.
Right.
Oh my!
For an American flag.
For an American flag.
Pretty sure a whole lot of Black people died to protect that flag too. They seem to forget them.
They seem to not look at the picture of the people that are carrying the flag and see the complexity of our student body on both sides of this conversation. It's
rhetoric is so much fun, right?
Well, I think so. The encampment is fun, and we're talking about how, in fact, the feeling of threat is like critical to the effectiveness of the whole thing. You're responding quite correctly to the feeling of threat that they were trying to bring against the university, but I'm saying that the encampment, everybody, even the letter doesn't say it wasn't. It's not permitted. What they're trying to say is our free speech rules should have permitted it indefinitely because it's speech, but you're right. It's like pornography as speech. It's not. It's a slippery category.
Yeah.
But that many of the things that they were describing that the students were learning from, these students. It's like they've gone and camped in the woods and a bear came at them, and now they have an adventure.
A bear, right? Holding an American flag.
Well, that's why people go camping, isn't it? So they can get eaten by bears. It's the same reason they climb mountains and stuff, so they can fall off of them. Come on. It's And I find this ironic because a great deal of the effectiveness of the whole experience is that there was the threat of the police coming in and taking it down. I think when the police came to take it down, there weren't very many people there, which is why they did it in the morning, because they were not doing it when in the middle of the day when everybody's filled with the campus. They're doing it in the early hours of the morning when they observed that not very many people were there, because actually not that many people were sleeping in the tents.
Well, it was a smart thing to do, because even if people have been sleeping in the tents, then they're off guard and unlikely to fight. Right, so the risk of violence is less.
Right, because they didn't actually want people so like this in this picture from the TikTok about the camp. It's like the guys are walking with the flag, and and at that point they get nowhere near they're not even near that wall that we've shown earlier of the boards and things like that. The campers had come towards them, so they met. They're meeting. You can see, if you know the architecture of the campus, they're on one of the pavements. So the wall was behind the pavement. So if they met in the line at the point where they are in this video, that means the campers came out to meet them, locked arms. The guy with the shield has his round shield thing, and one of the flag walkers is putting his chest up against it. So they are, I forgot what I was talking about.
I thought you were talking about a physical threat. The threat of physical violence from the police, I said, was less because they came in the middle of the night.
So if they'd done it in the middle of the day, as this happened, right, there would be more people around, and the campers would have been willing to like stand up and lock arms and stuff like that. And yes, then which, as I said in the video from last week, when I went into the camp, I did not want anybody getting hurt, because it's camp, it's not war.
I suspect a lot of people in the camp who weren't students, who were assigned that particular protest, a demonstration, were probably told to start something with the police, trying to get, and that's another reason to do it in the middle of the night. You're not giving them a photo op. To do that.
Well, we want, we like our photo op with our flags. There's flags and there's more flags and such like that.
It's the tournament.
There it is. It's a tournament, right? And I think it would have been a much more, if people went Chicago style, it would have been much more of a tournament if it was like the Burke Society, where they actually got up and debated and gave speeches. And what
work? Preparing, reading. Ugh.
My students do all of their homework. Therefore, they're not watching this live stream right now. Yeah, well, indeed. So what was this, in fact, if it was not speech? You had some ideas, some examples, some comparative examples. Shall we show them what kind of event this actually was?
Sure.
Dun, dun, dun. I found some tents. Look at that. Where's this? It's got some lights on the line. It's they're in the order you gave them to me.
I know. I'm trying to think what order to give them to you. So this is all from 2019. Which was interesting. You said that your conference was 2019 because it's the last year people were just meeting as normal. Right. So the first one is World Youth Day 2019.
World Youth Day. Look at that. All those tents. You mean the youth have other opportunities to go in tents?
Yes,
and have intense bonding experiences on the basis of their camping together. Okay,
over something of deep meaning.
For something to do. World Youth Day. What was that?
So World Youth Day 2019, that was, I think, in Lisbon, Portugal. So since 1985, Pope John Paul II started a World Youth Day, which was youth between the ages, I think, like 16 and 30. They called 30 youth, which is pushing it, in my opinion. But it's just, it's an open air mass and confessions, and you just meet people from all over the world in your age group, in your religion, and you listen to speakers and music, and it's almost It's almost like a music concert, but with a mass for Catholic youth, and it's held once every 2 years, not every year. I think once every 2 or 3 years.
And there's there's a pope in the car with banners. People from all over the world came together to have peace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they peaceful demonstrating how they can be peaceful with one another while gathering together for fellowship and social interaction. And the message is peace and living out your faith.
I mean, one of the things I was thinking about of all of the things in the camp that I was seeing, and the thing is, because I do think it's a camp, it's not speech. If you want them giving speeches, we have other forms of that. But I am actually sympathetic to why my colleagues were finding it this energizing. I mean, that would be horrible to some of my colleagues who were terrified by the chants, right? But on the other side, I'm too good at being an ant, and on neither side. On the other side, I did understand why my colleagues who thought the camp was a nice thing, because camping in this way of bringing people together and trying to bond together in ways that, I was saying with the conference, like if you're just sitting there on a Zoom call, you don't have this kind of embodied experience, obviously. Mm-hmm. And
well, like as we spoke about last week, they want to do something, right? Sitting behind a computer is not doing something. You want to get up, walk out,
right,
meet other people,
right.
Yeah.
And I mean, to say if what my colleagues are mainly, they're saying we're so happy to see the youth taking a position on things. It's like, well, they take positions on things all the time. So I think the specific form of this was this kind of well, it's a ritual, was what I said, and this is actually what I said. This is what I said in our meeting, so I'll read it out because I tweeted it with pictures, right? My name is Rachel Fulton Brown. I'm a medieval historian in the history department. I study rituals and other spiritual practices and the way they shape psychology and culture. This affects the way I see the camps. The camps are a danger to speech because they are not about speech. I was trying to be, I only had 2 minutes, so I had to be as clear as possible and say, you all are making the argument for the camp staying on indefinitely because you say it's about speech, but it's not speech. They're not about speech. They're rituals designed to polarize. Now, what's ironic is, of course, if my colleagues are watching this and they saw this giant camp of Catholics,
mm-hmm.
We'll go back to the camp, right? It was enormous, this World Youth Day. That's a lot of tents. I mean, they are. Yes. These are huge.
They are huge. There's
huge.
Tens of
thousands of kids camped together, Catholics, with banners.
Yep.
So the rituals designed to polarize, which I think means it's like in camp, out camp, right? And the whole point about the youth camp is to say we are Catholics in this camp, right?
Yeah.
Identity.
Right. They were right. They were unified in their Catholic identity.
Right.
And I think that the camp at the UChicago, they were unified in their desire to obstruct normal campus life, but they had as we pointed out last week, they had a couple of different things going on being promoted there.
Right.
It wasn't just Palestine, Israel. It was just oh, hey, we're doing a camp. Come bring your grievances, right? It's like grievance camp, I guess.
Well, and one of the principal ones being don't use the police. And it's like,
yeah.
Okay. I mean, if what they wanted to do, and the thing is, I think doing this kind of group experience, obviously it's, transformative in positive and negative ways. It's a cult for goodness sake, people. And you recognize that. It's like they're going to recognize it and say, oh, look at all those Catholics in tents with banners. That's a cult. Oh, really?
And what are you? Oh, it's just speech.
Right?
It's the same bonding ritual, right? But for radically different reasons.
Catholics in tents with banners. I mean, oh my goodness. Their purpose.
The Crusades. Sorry.
Their purpose is to create emotional bonds and rivalries among our students. And I did say this, so they can be sent into battle against each other, which, because everybody was worried about the flag boys. It's like, you guys set this up so that that would happen. The campers came out of the enclosure, exactly, locked arms, and wanted to prevent the boys, young men, from walking to the flagpole.
It's like they practiced.
It was a very smooth movement on their part, locking arms the way they did.
I'm impressed that they did that spontaneously without any forethought.
I'm boggling, right? Clearly they've been training in their tournament camp. Thinking the camps are primarily about speech is like thinking the Mass is primarily about the sermon. I was particularly proud of that, right? Really? Got all the Protestants mad at me too. Speech is part of the ritual, but it is not the point of the ritual, right? And it's like, oh yes, right, sermons are very short in Catholic churches right now, right? They're not like 3 hours long or something like that. It's like a lecture is different from a sermon in a Mass. And right, you guys would hate that if you know, it's like, when do I get to give my sermon, eh? Oh, but you're not supposed to sermonize in class. Heaven forbid. Wait, no. Institutional neutrality forbid. You in your classroom. I've gotten in so much like rhetorical trouble for things that I've said in my public life. We were actually talking about this at the beginning. It's like okay, maybe this is the proper time to come in. So if you go and look at my academic homepage, which is hosted on the University of Chicago website, because I'm private my personal webpage, as part of my privileges as a professor and member of the community, it's like a dev server space, right? That I have my professional self labeled one way. This is the teaching and research I do. And then my public self, right? And there's all of these other activities, the blogging and the live streams and, you know, wherever else I'm doing. And I was strongly told I needed to do that back 7-8 years ago when I wrote the blog post about how if we don't practice having theological debates and other things in our university campuses, the religious emotions are going to rise so high that we're just going to end up on the streets. Well, we ended up in the camp, right, in the middle of the quad. Yeah. And when I did that, at that point, I had not made those two clearly labeled sections on my homepage, and people were saying, "Oh no, she has her blog linked." My Fancy Barrett prayer blog, which is mainly Christian at that point. You know, so, talking about Milo, who has, by the way, quit his job with Kanye West because of the porn. Porn is not just speech. Thank you very much. That they're saying I should not be able to link my blog talking about fencing and prayer and what Milo was saying was important spiritually to my professional self because people might think that I speak for the University of Chicago. And I'm like, what? That's literally labeled my own personal homepage. And you want me to say that everything I say is fencing Barrett prayer, a toy, right? My avatar that I specifically created in order to be able to have a different voice in the world needs to be labeled differently so that you don't get confused on which way I'm speaking. The mind boggles. The letter is published on. You're gone. The letter is published. No, I'm back. Published on the university college newspaper site.
Right, but look for it to be published outside of the University of Chicago system in some way, because, like, sometimes you see letters like this published in places like the Wall Street Journal or some other large national or international publication. And when that happens, have they crossed the line they set for you?
Well, ironically, the reason this group exists, that they're able to corral this many signatures, is because they do exist as an ongoing listserv. And that listserv was formed because a group of faculty, including me at the time, signed a letter that was published in the New York Times against the naming of this particular economic institute as the Milton Friedman Institute. So Yes, possibly. And this, I mean, okay, so as academics, we should be better at our categories, right? But interestingly, we're consistently not. It's like if Rachel Fulton Brown, who is Catholic, speaks, when is she speaking as a Catholic and when is she speaking as, the professor of the history department?
Yeah.
Apparently on campus in the encampment, the people, were allowed to take a moral position, which is what the letter says. It says a sincere, thoughtful, and passionate disagreement were a mark of moral failure among our students.
Moral failure.
I was told I'd morally failed to understand how bad Milo was when I wrote the newsletter piece that was apparently not footnoted properly so that it triggered everybody. And I'm like, well, indeed, right?
Immoral for writing about Milo years ago when you did, but they also have a problem with you expressing a Catholic morality on your own blog site. Mm-hmm. So which is it? You failed to be moral, you're being too moral. It's very split personality.
I did say in that, piece that we needed to practice these kinds of discussions in situations so that we don't end up in high emotion and people get hurt.
They have a very flexible dictionary, don't they?
It's astonishing. It's astonishing. So here is this dangerous encampment, clearly, with youth praying and going to mass and, cheering with flags of all nations as the Pope rides in his white car through the center of this procession.
Yeah. I'm sure they wouldn't. I'm sure they wouldn't like that going through. You have to organize somebody has to organize an good old fashioned pilgrimage right through the campus.
We could process.
I think they'd be apoplectic.
I do wonder what kind of response would the campus have to? Well, the thing is, okay, if we encamped for World Youth Day, how about we have some other examples. I think this is this still World Youth Day? There's a view over a water and they're around a statue. I think that's still World Youth Day. That's a lot of people.
So it's what?
You need to remember your own pictures.
So, I know. So I've got pictures of Mecca also.
We're not there yet.
So if you see
here we have this. Okay, now we have. Here's another kind of encampment, or they look exactly the same from a distance. This one's got some rainbow tints.
Oh, that.
This is a different religion, right?
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
Okay, so where is this?
That is the music festival in England. Gosh darn it, what's it called?
Glastonbury. That's the pagan festival.
Glastonbury, thank you. Yeah, but there was an abbey on it at one point too, right? So
yes, they have it there because that's where King Arthur and Guinevere were found in the 12th century, conveniently at the end of the 12th century, so as to have the king come visit, and Henry II came to visit, and say here the mystic history of
yes.
The Anglo-Normans can be wedded onto the mystic history of the Celts. And it's got a very...
And we can drink a lot and smoke a lot of weed, too.
It's got a really mystic hill with a tower on it, which is what's all left of the church, I think.
Right.
That Tor Glastonbury. Okay, so now it has this big festival with tents, right? This is, look, they've got banners, too.
Banners and advertisements in the back.
I bet this is a bonding experience.
Yeah, I'd say it's a pretty powerful one for youth, for the youth, and quite a few middle-aged and some older people too. It's been going on for 50 years,
yes,
right?
Yes, and so it's almost as long as Kalamazoo.
Vastly different, but yes.
I beg your pardon. People dress up in costume at Kalamazoo on a regular basis. Not very many of them, but
They do?
Well, this was one of the things that got, it's sort of early in its early days became famous. There's a dance which I've been to like twice in my life, and I was like, it's the last thing at night on Saturday, and I'm too tired, so forget it. But there have been sometimes. I think my favorite was there was a demonstration of a war horse doing its paces one year. That was cool.
Oh, cool.
There was famously probably a trebuchet, but I know that did happen one of the times I was there. There's often like musical performances, so ensembles.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Would love to go to that.
Well, and then they're actual like Cistercians. There's a Cistercian community nearby, and so they're there in their habits,
cool.
right? They're formally.
Nice.
Most of the costumes people are wearing are academia, which that's its own dress code, right?
Do they wear the long black robes and those funny hats? Are they
academia? No. I mean the Cistercians, they're in sort of I guess it's like what we would wear as a suit or something, right? It's not, they're long skirts and stuff, but it's dress habits, right? They're not that elaborate. Okay.
Yeah.
No, but the academics are in various forms of performance dress of academia, which is various. Many tattoos, different colored, different hair hues of hair. Some suits, some dresses, some it's the full range, right? Because medieval studies is a very big camp of people. It goes from quite stodgy to piercings, right? And so it's all of it. Yeah. On the one day I went and read a lot of books and talked to the guys who do facsimiles and ate Jelly Bellies off of the Scholar's Choice table. The day I did go to some sessions, the first talk was by a senior colleague who works at Yale on Catalan, the history of Catalonia in the 18th and from the 18th and 19th century, which was very interesting. And then I went to a session on, I don't think it was called this, but sex magic. Sponsored by the Societas Magica, and it was very interesting on some ancient amulet prayers and some Kabbalah, right? So that was that one session. And the next session I went to was on Our Lady and the Cistercian Fathers. It's a big tent.
That is quite a mixed bag. It sounds really
that fun. Was one day, right? I only went to sessions for one day, and that's okay. So that obviously that kind of intellectual diversity is in exactly what we are hopefully up to in academia, which is the ritual of the Catholic youth and their mass and the presence of the Pope and the meaning of the Pope, the Glastonbury and whatever it's going on there and its musical performances and its rituals and stuff. When I said, as a medievalist, I see these camps as a certain kind of experience and performance. Guess what, right? These are all camps, and they have similar forms, similar kinds of expression and energy. Now, then, of course, if you're trying to tell the difference between the camps, here's the Catholic camp, which presumably some of my colleagues would find absolutely terrifying because they're convinced Catholics are about to, who knows what, pray at them or something. We might pull out rosaries and invoke Our Lady, right?
I'm going to say a little prayer against you.
I'm going to pray for your conversion. Horrifying, right? Here's the Glastonbury one. I think more of my colleagues would be perfectly comfortable with the Glastonbury, however much drugs and sex there is going on. I don't know anymore, right? Who knows? I haven't been to it.
Oh, from the pictures I saw a lot.
Right.
So much so that the British government's putting out, take drugs safely pamphlets for people that go there.
But I mean, come on, ecstasy is worth the risk, isn't it?
Yeah. I guess. It is until it isn't.
Right, but there's another kind of tent. These tents look like they're in the desert.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a couple of different pictures. There's some very modest tents with people milling around in the evening, and then there's these really big, expansive
The air conditioned
tents.
tents. I've heard of these. Yes.
Yeah, it's like the glamping, right?
Yes.
So for these are for the pilgrims on the Hajj to Mecca, and the particular I really liked this one because particular day they do a ritual called stoning the devil.
Oh my. Okay.
Who does not want to stone the devil? That sounds like a party. So yeah, they pick up stones and they symbolically stone the devil.
Right.
Throw stones at this big block. But yeah, definitely ritual, definitely shared experience. Yeah, very similar to the other two. Always tense. No flags though. There was no flags. I couldn't see any pictures of flags there.
No banners with the Hajj.
No banners. No. Mm-mm.
Well, camping is clearly a powerful experience. I'm still not sure it has to do with speech. Or no, obviously I'd say we ended up this is an aerial view of the campers in confrontation with the police on the morning after they took the tent, and the police are these little dots, right? There's trees, right, and dots, and there's a bunch of people. It's maybe 100. It's hard to say, and it's hard to know how many of those were in the camp and how many had collected by this time because it's already daytime. But there's a small line of police with some yellow barriers, and then the people in the street. And if you see it from that perspective, you clearly see that there's a line of police with yellow barriers and the people in the street. And there's nothing the police are doing except standing by the barriers, and the people are in the street. Whereas if you see this picture, the police are clearly lined up aggressively, militarily against the campers who are crushed up against those yellow barriers, trapped, which is not true because they can turn around and walk away.
You force them, though. You see, the police force
them into that situation.
They used force. Right. The police did to them what they were trying to do to everybody else, and they didn't like it.
Well, I think the entire thing was set up to generate this picture, as you've said, right? Yep. Which, if we go back to the previous picture, the only reason you get this picture is because the people are willing. The people now out in the street, on the other side of the administration building, are trying to force themselves up against that barrier, so that this picture with the police, and there's one woman using her hand to make a expressive gesture, and there's some women in the police line too, so it's interesting, sort of like if you can look at this one fairly closely and see the police faces, the police officers' faces behind their mask. It's like, I get why having someone who's in armor, a helmet and a face shield, and it's got, I mean, they are armed, they do carry sidearms, but I think they had their sticks and stuff. They're armed and you're not. Okay, but I mean, football players are pretty well armed against each other.
Yeah.
The police are wearing that equipment so that this line of people that are going to fling themselves at them and curse them don't hurt them.
Yeah. Right. Or start fighting each other and start hurting other people. Because they're not mind readers. They have to come prepared. Well, but
the problem, and this is for me, the whole problem of the camps, the whole problem of this whole entire situation is, one, that it was not speech. It was really some kind of other, bonding experience to create energy. Whose energy? I mean, we were talking about this a lot over the last several years in Drake Alchemics, like whose energy is fed by what, and we can go back to the Catholic community. We'll go back to theirs, right? If you see that as a threatening thing, because it's here like a field full of kids praying.
Yeah, that's interesting. They would see that as a threat. You're right. They would see it as white supremacy, even though like a whole ton of people there are from Africa. But no, they're African white supremacists because it's seen as a European religion, and so that's a threat, right? But they don't see a bunch of kids at Glastonbury,
But was Glastonbury a threat or not? I mean, here's another
it's
crowd
not a threat
with banners.
Because they're not being traditionally moral, right? They're engaging in partying and sex and drugs and rock and roll, literally, with copious amounts of alcohol to go along with it, and public nudity, and that's all good because they think it's pagan. I think they'd be shocked to actually meet actual pagans from 2,000 years ago.
We're going to talk about that next week.
Yeah, I don't think they are what they think they are. Life was not a party. They probably wouldn't have liked it. But yeah, they would see the cap. That's really interesting because there's a whole spiritual dimension here that hasn't been discussed yet today. But it's definitely ongoing, and it's influencing the way people see other groups of people.
Oh, huge. For sure. Huge.
Yeah.
And we did, Kiltz and I did a Mosaic Ark episode almost 2 years ago now about Burning Man, right?
Yes, I remember that.
And the effects of this. I mean, this is okay, so obviously, to be continued, right? Because we're still talking about this constantly. The effects of these rituals. Who's being summoned? Who's being praised? Who's being worshipped? It's a cult. And it is very interesting that, of course, the same colleagues. Okay, so I kept reading. There's a little bit more. The goal of the camp was to initiate rivalry and be taken down by the police. Right? It was designed to end up with just like the Mecca thing is designed to end up throwing stones at Satan.
Right.
Right.
Builds up to that.
This builds up to this photo of the line of police and the line of the protesters. They wanted that photo. I know they wanted that photo. This set up to put our students in danger because they wanted to have that photo with the police. I got angry last week on that too. It's like, talk about who's endangering who. They were not going to leave until they got this photo.
And that's why it's so important for the signatories to keep making the claim that it was about the students, and the students were doing this, and they were endangering our students because they weren't. They were outside agitators.
Right.
They were organized. They were doing it in campuses all over the country. People own televisions, people. We see it. We've got the internet in our pockets. You can't pretend anymore that this is spontaneous and organic and developed from the students up, because it didn't. It obviously didn't.
And that's, I mean, the letter and the way the faculty have been talking is that it's our students wanting this. Our students want this.
Right. And for the students who don't, well, who cares about them? They're immoral, right?
Right.
They're immoral for not taking our side, just like the president.
Right, which is ironically the whole problem of our Calvin report, which is we don't, I mean, as an institution, we don't take sides. You say, well, he took a side because he ordered the police to take the camp down. And you're like, there's got to be a logical fallacy for this.
No, he took the side. He took the side of the university itself as a whole, and not just one small vocal portion of it, which is what you're supposed to do when you're the president, and you're supposed to be taking care of everybody on the campus and making sure they all get to do what they're there to do, which is not to protest.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just kind of surprised they let him stay up for a week. I thought that was overly generous.
It's I think, I mean, the encampment phenomenon in these terms is novel for the administrators, that they understand what to do about building capture, right? Will take over the administration,
right?
Oh my gosh, what are the outside agitators going to think of next? Have considered, right? Because if they come up with and what's interesting is the playbook is, how do you get out of this with the minimum of complete breakdown of your community? Because these demonstrations are designed to destroy the institutions.
Right. The same way they were designed to destroy inner cities.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, I was born in 1967 and 1968 was not a good year for this country.
Right.
Or people were burning down cities everywhere, especially along the East Coast. And they started doing it again 3 years ago. And this is an election year. I'll go into that. But there's going to be, which I just found out last week because you told me it's going to be the Democrat National Convention in Chicago,
right?
Just like it was in 1968.
Who writes the script? It's too much.
Hollywood, because they keep doing repeats and remakes, right? Easy. Just
yes, and indeed these things are scripted so that you can have this kind of experience, so that you can bond together in worship, right? Well, guess what, guys?
Yeah, we can bond together in riots, right? Because that's what it's leading up to. I think that's what it's designed to lead up to. It's designed to provoke so that a riot can happen, so somebody can be there getting great pictures. Somebody with no soul can be there getting great pictures out of it. It's nasty. But it's been done before. I've seen this movie before.
Yeah. So we are going to continue this analysis, as Casey is already projecting, back into the past. And you're right, we need to talk about what kind of rituals these are and what kinds of effects they have. And we have a very special guest next week, John Daniel Davidson, to talk to us about his book, Pagan America. And this is almost, it's like we'd actually already planned with him to do that. And then here we end up with an encampment to set it up as, in fact, this is why what he's argued in his book matters so much, because it's the long version of what I said in that piece that got my colleagues, all worried about whether I was taking sides with Christ. Well, yes, I am.
He wins, you lose. Okay, next.
Because we here on the Mosaic Ark are here on a mission to explain to you why it matters so much that you pick the right team in this particular engagement. There are going to be camps. You want to be in the right one.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best I can do for an ending, right?
To be continued.
To be continued. Yes. We got, well, Annie and Mel have been writing along with us on Unauthorized. And my Dragon Comer chat is talking about Milo. Well, okay, fine.
Okay. Well,
now that he's no longer working for Kanye, I wonder whether he can pay attention to us again. I don't know. Anyway, you guys need to join us next week live with questions for John Daniel Davidson, because he's going to be talking about his amazing book on our choice, and it really is Christ or baby murder. So
yeah. That's it.
And we said, I think I mentioned this last week, that the Students for Justice in Palestine were protesting outside the pro-life conference that the students had on campus a few weeks ago. So I guess they've said their side.
What justice do they want for Palestine? How many babies are being murdered there daily?
Well, they thought it was appropriate to argue for the choice that women make to dismember their babies in the womb. So I guess it...
Oh, okay. It's okay if the mother makes that choice, but not the IDF. Got it. Okay.
I'm going to trigger Casey, and she's going to start up all over again tonight.
Okay, I just triggered half of Chicago probably, but that's okay.
Anyway, yes, we are in a moral battle of cosmic proportions, and it really, really matters that you end up on the right side. Stick with us on the Mosaic Ark, and we'll try to show you why. Thanks for joining us.